everyone, Joey here, aka Animus, and today I'm going to be counting down my top 25 favourite albums of 2024. Yes, I am not traditionally very prompt with these things, and yet it still feels crazy that I'm already doing one of these again. 2024 was just a damn fast year for me personally, but a very fun and exciting one in a lot of ways nonetheless, and I hope it's been similar for you guys. It does feel very different to be a music fan right now after the end of 2024 than it did this time a year ago, and I don't think I'm alone in that feeling. Because on a more personal level, this has been one of the least clear-cut rankings I've ever made. My number one was clear to me pretty much from the moment I heard it, and the top 5 or so albums were easy to point at as being in a tier of their own. But this year has been chocked full of 8s and 8.5s coming out practically every week for me, and most of this list could be subject to dramatic reshuffling upon further listens. This is not a complaint though, it goes to show what a big stream of great records was flowing this year. But on a more general level, the main thing making 2024 stand out among other years in music was the pop. In contrast with last year, which I actively described as a bit of an underwhelming year for mainstream releases, pop music hasn't been this much of a huge, dominant, bombastic force in the cultural landscape since probably the early 2010s, and that's also reflected in my own list, among a bunch of modern cult classics and hidden gems as well. So before we get started, here is an assortment of all sorts of honourable mentions in no particular order of things that didn't make this list, but are very, very much worth your time. Usual reminder that this is an entirely subjective video, which I, in fact, hope you disagree with so that we can have an interesting discussion. Also that I'm sure there's a bunch of things I haven't yet checked out which I'll listen to and could retroactively become part of this list. But with all that being said, let's get into it. At number 25, I have The Smile with Wall of Eyes. Easily the best of the 2 Smile records we got this year, in my opinion. Just because this band are Radiohead light does not mean they're light on ideas. Thom Yorke and co have once again warped rock music into a fresh sonic landscape that's bleakly beautiful and thrillingly inventive. At number 24, I've got Monolake with Studio. This mad genius of minimal techno and IDM is a huge personal favourite of mine, and it's no surprise that this album delivers in spades on the ear candy front, but its loose concepts, uniquely earthy tones, and engrossingly dramatic progressions give it a new edge in the context of his wider discography. The new Machine Girl record is at number 23, MG Ultra. This bonkers cult favourite digital hardcore duo are back with perhaps their hookiest release to date, but it's no less of a thrillingly dense, high-octane rollercoaster ride than existing fans have come to expect. I cannot wait to jump into that mosh pit in a few months. At number 22, I've got DJ Sabrina the Teenage DJ with Hex, another artist who somehow managed to put 2 whole releases out this year. This sugary sweet 2000s nostalgia-inspired house and plunderphonics artist is becoming a reliably prolific vibe machine within a niche all of her own. But this stood out to me as an incredibly energetic, engaging, and varied experience that could potentially be a contender for my favourite release of hers overall. I'm just deciding between this being a more succinct experience and Destiny just being so out there and bombastic and surprisingly consistent across its unbelievable monolithic runtime, but Hex has got to be up there for me and I cannot recommend it enough if this sounds like your sort of thing. And then at number 21, for something on more or less the entire opposite end of the musical spectrum, I've got Blood Incantation with Absolute Elsewhere. For a progressive death metal group to make an album that I mess with this much was one of the nicest surprises of my 2024 in music. This is a brisk, airtight and impactful experience, fusing gargantuan riffs with the aesthetics and overall spirit of elaborate 70s prog rock, down to a delightful feature from Tangerine Dream themselves. This thing will hold your ears captive for a full 45 minutes, and it's just plain fun. But that wasn't quite my favourite metal album of 2024, because at number 20 we have Knocked Loose with You Won't Go Before You're Supposed To. Once I acclimatized to the slightly Fred Durst-esque screams of the singer in this group, this record clicked hard. A furious cavalcade of some of the most thrillingly crushing walls of guitar you'll find in recent metalcore music, and under 30 minutes it doesn't waste a second in delivering the most concentrated punch of a listen you can imagine. Something you might see on a few less people's lists at number 19, I have Come and Have a Go with Club Morpheus. If you've never heard of this UK duo, you might want to change that as soon as possible, because this is simply some of the most effervescent and irresistible pop music of the year, even in such a huge time for the genre. It's bursting with energy and an eclectic range of influences, bringing the sort of commanding vocal presence you'd find on a blockbuster 80s synth-pop record, but recontextualizing that energy within the vibrant and unpredictable sonic landscape of a post-hyperpop, post-brat world. It really is a big time for the gays. Number 18, I Lay My Life Down For You by JPEG Mafia. It is no surprise at this point for this experimental hip-hop titan to put out bonkers, eclectic, and deliriously energetic new bangers. Along with his colourful vocal presence, the real star of the show here is the production and instrumentation, especially the touches of heavy rock that lend the record a sense of anarchic fun beyond the conventional borders of the genre. Number 17 won't be much of a surprise if you know me well, Adrian Lenker with Bright Future, one of the greatest, most unique singers and songwriters of the last decade, in my opinion, with a collection of raw, minimal, bucolic, and achingly personal pieces. Many of the best songs of the year can be found on this record, in my opinion, which can hit like a ton of bricks on an emotional level. This is all down to Adrian Lenker's almost unparalleled ability to resonate with even the most ineffable human experiences through her words and music. And finally, in this section of the list, Kamasi Washington with Fearless Movement. I think this guy ranks among the greatest jazz musicians of the 21st century, and my incredibly high expectations for this album were completely warranted. This is a long and opulent record, equally energetic and majestic in its intricately winding improvisations and grand swells of emotion. It stands out in his discography and the modern jazz scene as a whole through the driving, percussive nature of many of its pieces, particularly the absolute showstopper finale, Prologue. Yes, I know a track called Prologue is at the end of the album, which is one of the most powerful musical moments of 2024. As much as I love Fearless Movement, this right here was my real favourite jazz LP of the year. I wish I'd checked out Nala Sinefro earlier, because this record is such a joy from start to finish in its lush and seamless fusion of jazz instrumentation with warm, fluttering electronics. It's like the sonic equivalent of a warm, freshly made bed you just want to cozy up in. This is an equally uplifting and rewarding listen, whether you put it on in the background or actively immerse yourself in it to pick up on all of its intricacies. And if you're looking for something to scratch a similar itch to the Floating Points Pharoah Sanders and LSO record Promises from a few years back, we finally have a new Jazztronica release that I think can hold a candle to it. Even though I've been hooked for quite some time on Hiatus Kaiyote's unique musical space at the intersection of jazz, funk, soul, rock, and electronica, and whatever else, I was not expecting this new record to make its way so high up on my list until recent listens. But even when this album remains in familiar territory for the band, it radiates such an earnest sense of optimism and excitement, with even more polish and swagger than ever ever that it really feels impossible not to be won over by. Once you settle into some of these grooves, it feels like they just take a hold of your body and soul and don't let go. Plus, the final two tracks even pull a massive 180 and hit you with some of the year's most bonkersly bombastic alternative punk sort of stuff. What? If nothing else, check out Cinnamon Temple and see how you feel once you come back down from the clouds. The long awaited return of UK house artist Jamie XX was just as welcome in my 2024 as I'd hoped. This album is full of bright, vibrant and explosive bangers and many of my defining earworms of the year. The production is punchy and on point, and the hooks and samples are as expertly crafted as those on In Colour. There's great features from artists like Panda Bear, Robin, and even the bloody Avalanches. It never fails to put me in a good mood while also hitting on a deeper emotional level with its more poignant moments such as Still Summer and Falling Together. I can tell this is going to be one of the biggest 2024 nostalgia buttons for future me, not least because of how continually replayable it's been. It really doesn't seem like expectations can be set too high for South Korean shoegaze artist Parannoul. Even if I still slightly prefer the sound and aesthetic of After the Magic, Sky 100 is unparalleled within his discography for its sheer emotional heft. These are intensely cathartic pieces of music that are gorgeous to listen to in their own distorted, overwhelming way. It almost feels like staring straight at the sun sometimes, with the amount of raw and painful beauty within his music and lyrics, confronting difficult, existential truths and ultimately finding a new form of peace on the other side. I think out of all my placements on this list, this is gonna be the slightly out there oddball one, and it's taken a while to realise and accept that it just had to be this high up in my rankings. As I said in one of my tier list videos, Confidence Man seemed to have hit upon a dance pop formula that absolutely hacks my brain in all of the right places. There's like a gravitational pull between me and this album that's led to it becoming easily one of my most listened to records of the year. Confidently simplistic, wearing kitsch and cliche on its sleeve, but nailing every earworm hook hard enough to voodoo a dance floor into absolute mayhem, all leading to an irresistible 45 minutes of pure capital P pop. Not everyone's gonna fuck with this album as much as me, but if you get on its hedonistic wavelength, it's an absolute blast. Dumb, fun party music is an art, and in that case, Confidence Man are our new Van Gogh. Floating Points had already solidified himself as a thrillingly original and versatile force in modern electronic music, with 2021's Promises, a transcendent genreless symphony which topped my year-end list at the time and I still view as his masterpiece so far. So this new collection of minimalist tech house bangers felt surprisingly straightforward by his standards. It just so happened that the whole thing was executed with such pitch-perfect precision, spotless production, and inescapable groove that Cascades turned out as the refreshing change of pace in his discography that I didn't even know I needed. You feel like you're riding blissful waves of earth-rattling bass, hypnotic melodic progressions, and sparkling sound design that carry you weightlessly through an hour-long runtime with just the right pacing and structure layering. If you want to hear one absolute stunner on here, then Fast Forward is absolutely one of the highlights of the year in electronic music. A surreal whirlwind of analog beauty that seems to keep on lifting you higher and higher into a timeless space. But this entire record just sits at a perfect intersection of making you want to get out on the dance floor while also creating an enveloping sonic environment for headphone users, meaning that it's certainly going to be something to hold on to long term. Some albums are suited to generating discourse, and some albums you barely want to try to put words to because they just need to be heard and felt on their own terms. This new release from post-rock titans Godspeed You Black Emperor is truly meditative and emotionally impactful in a way that I don't feel I could sit here and do justice to. An emotional response to one of the most harrowing world events in a long time, where music says what words can't. It often somehow manages to feel funereal and comforting at the same time, its enveloping waves of distorted and expansive sound rising and falling, as compelling in their moments of quiet contemplation as in the crashing crescendos that eventually come. This is the sort of effect the band have achieved across many other fantastic records, but this one occupies a uniquely quiet yet deeply emotionally charged place within their discography, and is my favourite release of theirs from the last decade. And here we got another record that's just been moving up and up with each successive listen. Igloo Ghost has crafted such an outlandish sonic landscape of organised chaos on this album, with sound design that feels more dirty, weathered, and rough around the edges than on his more polished first two records, but is equally bursting with his unique and playful personality as an artist. One of the things I adore the absolute most about electronic music is this ability to put your own personal stamp on every single aspect of a piece of music, build an entire world within an album from the ground up, and that's one of the things that Igloo Ghost does the absolute best as a producer, putting so much love and work into every nook and cranny of what you hear, and even fleshing out an entire lore-filled backdrop to each era. It just so helps that even stripping these pieces down to their core musical elements, these are some addictively exhilarating bangers that just seem to get a little bit better every time I hear them. In my opinion, this is probably his best yet, and I cannot wait to hear what the future holds for Igloo Ghost. I'm not sure exactly how out there it's considered to call Ski Mask one of the most ingenious forces in modern electronic music, and one of the closest spiritual equivalents we have right now to some of the IDM pioneers of the 90s, but I've described him as such before, and I'll say the exact same thing again. While I still think Compro and Pool are even better, after all, how many things are those records not better than? Resort fits beautifully into a slightly different niche, emotionally, sonically, and in terms of the overall listening experience. We've gone from desolate, expansive soundscapes to glittering, glitchy bangers to now the calm, understated excellence that defines this new era of Ski Mask. This record feels so wonderfully confident in itself and comfortable enough to just take room to breathe. It's not afraid to simply let you bathe in its warm, rich layers of sound for even a couple of whole beatless tracks at a time. So when it does accelerate into its more percussive moments, your patience is rewarded in spades by some of the purest audio pleasure of Ski Mask's discography and of the whole year in music. It's not often that electronic textures have me kicking my feet and giggling, but tracks like Schneider's Paradox and Hölzel Was a Dancer are absolute sonic wonderlands that I can't see failing to put a smile on the face of anyone with even a passing interest in the genre. It's mostly a subtle and unhurried release, but all the better for it. I've only got more and more confident over time that Resort is one of the records most worth holding on to beyond 2024.
All the revolutionaries, all the jihadis too. Everyone knows I'm holy.
The sudden implosion of experimental rock group Black Midi was undoubtedly a surprise to us all, and I couldn't help but grieve a little at the output of one of my absolute favourite bands within their field being cut short at a trilogy. Already though, one of their eccentric masterminds has launched his solo career with an absolute bang. The new sound, fittingly considering its title, is one of those albums that completely obliterates the myth that musical creativity is on a decline. Bursting with off-kilter, samba-like energy which collides with his usual experimental rock wheelhouse to create something wonderfully bizarre and bizarrely wonderful. Some of these extended crescendos and improvisational passages will have your jaw slowly dropping further and further toward the floor, while other moments urge you to break out into some frantic, weirdly rhythmed dance. All executed with flamboyant flair and the fearlessness of having a weird, loud, bold personality all of your own as an artist, which is so rare and admirable, especially from an artist who's only 7 years older than me. My god. It's a blast from start to finish that has me eagerly looking forward to hearing more bonkers new sounds from Mr. Creep. Surprised this ended up being the only vinyl record I got to show off on this video. Just a skill issue, I guess. Or inflation. This right here is the only inflation we need. To say getting a new Porter Robinson record in my 2024 was a huge deal would be a massive understatement. The follow-up to one of my favourite records of all time was in the strange position of being the most exciting prospect ever to me, but part of me also wanting it to be nothing like Nurture, which turned out to absolutely be the case. As with all of Porter's albums, it took a while to grow on me fully across several listens, but this one also had the added effect of being a deliberate subversion of a lot of the characteristics of that previous record in music and sentiment. His deliberate undermining of the sense of personal closure created by Nurture and the peaceful, enlightened image that album projected threw me for a bit of a loop and made it difficult to make up my mind on how exactly I felt about these songs, but I've eventually reached a place where I wholeheartedly accept this not as a rejection of his previous work, but a necessary development in the musical narrative of his life. Another part of the greater picture which allows us to see him as more messy, more human, and despite the amount of attention this album draws to fan and artist relationships, more easy to connect with in a funny way. Of course, it also helps that the music on here is an absolute joy. So punchy, colourful, and gleefully unpredictable, with its overtones of 2000s pop punk, emo, and pop rock, making it so that each of his 3 LPs has a completely distinct aesthetic and identity while still feeling like they come from the same artist. It's just 1 week now until I get to see Porter Robinson live again, and I already know I'm gonna be jumping for joy, jumping into mosh pits, and then pretty proceeding to cry my eyes out. You can watch my full review for more thoughts on this thing, but this short little 40-minute album has become one of the defining pieces of art in my 2024 easily, and is already very near to my heart. Fail Smith, my dude, can you leave some spots in the top 10 for other people? 3 years running now, that's just greedy. After Yo easily rocketed up to the top of last year's list, its follow-up being so similarly awesome was not much of a surprise. Though in structure and approach, If You See a Blur is kinda deliberately the antithesis of the record that came before it, swapping experimental sprawl for a more tight and focused burst of creative energy. But then among some bright, breezy, and notably accessible pieces, there's some wild curveballs thrown into the mix that elevate the experience to the thrilling heights of his best work. There's a whole dense, chaotic, and percussive section around the middle of the album where you're hit with some of the heaviest, most off-kilter ideas the artist has ever come up with. Synapse Flutter is one of the most face-meltingly awesome things, like, ever. An absolutely unforgettable listen with its huge unexpected swerve in the middle marking a turning point for the entire record. Honestly, one of the most memorable single moments of pure unbridled joy that any new piece of culture brought me in 2024. So yeah, this record somehow managed to contain some of Valesmith's most polished and broadly appealing work, and some of his most off-the-wall sound design wizardry, and wrap it all up in one neat and cohesive package. Once again, I don't call this guy one of my favourite electronic musicians of recent years for nothing. God, I am not beating the wonky angle similarity allegations with this one. I wrote this list in early December, and would you look at that, he has Hudson Lee at number 4 and Valesmith at number 3. I have Valesmith at number 4 and Hudson Lee at number 3. Maybe part of it is me already being very familiar with and attached to tracks off Yo that still slightly outshine similar moments on If You See a Blur for me, but on my list, Light Dancer just has the edge in the electronic ear candy department. That needs to be the name of the band. Despite the mind-boggling technicality of Hudson Lee's production, the end result here feels like it just sprang up out of the earth in the middle of a forest. Even though it was all made in a computer, you feel like you're listening to the rustling of leaves, the babbling of brooks, little woodland creatures scarpering through the undergrowth, and strange species of sprites whizzing past your head. And as if his solo abilities weren't enough, some of the most forward-thinking artists within this niche of detailed naturalistic electronica, such as Frequent, Koan Sound, and Alexander Panos, add their own unique flares at various points in the album, working toward a rich tapestry of complete audio magic. This total commitment to crafting such a vivid, aesthetically cohesive sonic biome calls to mind names such as the future sound of London, Gas, or more recently Fear, but this record has both feet firmly in the 2020s, which is weirdly not something we say about a lot of new music even though we're halfway through them. Light Dancer made for such an exciting and invigorating first listen, and that feeling is very much still alive as I continue to explore all the nooks and crannies of the weird and wonderful world this artist has built. So this had to be my pick for the best purely electronic album of 2024. I say purely electronic because let's not forget...
Kind of flow. Yeah, I wanna be blinded by the lights, lights, lights.
Unless I've got some recognition among the hermit crab demographic, you're probably not going to be very surprised by this one. But how can I not give a special mention to arguably the biggest, most defining cultural event of 2024? At least as someone who thinks about music 24/7, it felt like the two big things that happened in 2024 were Brat and the Kendrick and Drake beef, so one career going into the club, one career getting clubbed to death. Brat was not just an album, but a whole ass philosophy. It didn't invent all of its aesthetics and ideas. The entire indie sleaze movement, as it's now known, was a clear precedent of the Brat era, but the album's styles, themes, and presentation felt so timely and fresh that it was a work of complete genius. Obviously, almost all of these 15 slices of pop brilliance are absolute club weapons, bolstered by vibrant but raw production in a league all of its own, encouraging you to live fast, die young, party girls, do it well. And I filmed this section before she won 3 Brit Awards and shouted out Justice, Daft Punk, Arca, Aphex Twin, and Autechre in front of that whole crowd. What an icon, and how incredible it is to see these styles of electronic music birthing such a gigantic mainstream pop culture sensation. This is just an incredible timeline to be alive in. But what elevates it to such a strong level of staying power is its complex and earnest emotional undercurrent, which has really jumped out at me in particular on recent listens. Brat's detractors might call its lyrics on the nose, but Charlie is so deft here at conveying layered emotional experiences through the simplistic dialect of club music, making hedonism and existential dread part of the same lyrical picture in a way that's incredibly true to the turbulence of real life. The recession pop of the early 2010s might have provided a thrilling escapist fantasy, but what Charlie adds to the narrative here and completes it with is people's ability to feel so many theoretically conflicting things within a single moment. Obviously breaking down her specific personal experiences as someone who's been a strange kind of famous for most of her career, but hitting some painfully and beautifully relatable notes along the way. That's my intellectualization of Brat, but on a purely musical level, this is a bona fide pop masterwork and an absolute joy to listen to from start to finish. There are so many reasons why this era of Charli XCX has had such a gargantuan presence in even your grandma's 2024, and I just think it's a beautiful thing that one day I'm sure I'm gonna look back and say, I was 17 for Brat Summer. Hell yes. You know what also made my year though? Right from the moment I hit play, there was just something else in the air with this new Magdalena Bay album. It's not like I didn't already know that this duo were capable of great things. It's not even their first time on one of my year-end lists. But in terms of songwriting, performances, storytelling, production quality, and especially sound, Imaginal Disc is simply in a league of its own. If ever a pop record deserved to be described as extraterrestrial, it's right here, sounding like it came beamed down to Earth from a galaxy light years away. Radiating a sense of vibrant colour and life from start to finish, each track taking you on its own journey through unpredictable twists and turns and soaring crescendos, but fitting beautifully into the wider structure and loose sci-fi narrative of the album as a whole. 50 plus minutes is bold for a pop LP, but the constant varied flow of ideas and the practically perfect pacing and rhythm of it all makes the experience worth every second. I keep calling it a great pop album, and in terms of hooks and infectious choruses, it is impeccable, but it's also so much more than that. Even though it can be sugary sweet and utterly dreamlike, there's also a real sense of excitement and danger running through this thing. The opener, She Looked Like Me, has an unsteady tempo and pummeling larger-than-life percussion, showing off some of the year's coolest and most inventive electronic production. That's My Floor ventures almost into noise rock territory to contagious results, and I bet you weren't expecting Tunnel Vision to swerve into a paranoid psychedelic freakout halfway through, which was right up there with Veilsmith's Synapse Flutter for unforgettable first listen plot twists. So Matt and Mika have obviously utterly killed it from a sonic standpoint, and Mika's vocals sell the hell out of every number with a commanding presence like some ethereal deity, but that's not even mentioning all the additional musicians adding fuel to the space rocket that is this album. The grand swells of orchestration, the drums going absolutely ballistic across death and romance, which absolutely help elevate that already stunning track to the podium of 2024. Pretty clearly, no other release this year has given me quite the same giddy rush of inventive sonic magic as Imaginal Disc, and kept igniting that spark in me with each successive listen. It's spectacular, it's unreal, and it's my favourite album of 2024. Well, there you have it, we're finally looking firmly into 2025 for this channel. Thank you all so much again for sticking with me through the long process of putting together this video. If you've watched to this point, despite me being so late to the party that all the cakes already disappeared, you are the best. I'm always going to put these out no matter when they end up dropping, because it's so fun to look back on all the different special musical experiences of a given year and put it all into a little snapshot, and I hope you've got a similar level of enjoyment out of it, have maybe found some new music to check out, or have your own thoughts to share on 2024 and music, which I'd love to see in the comments. I've decided not to do another year-end gigs video in my usual format, since I'd rather get moving with new ideas for the year ahead. It's definitely going to be quite a different one, with me studying a bunch at the moment, traveling, and hopefully making a lot of music in the summer, and then going off to uni, but hopefully I can channel that chaos into some fun videos. Until then though, thank you so much for watching, a belated happy 2025, see you next time.